The day my father died. The world I thought I belonged to crumbled like sand slipping through my fingers. The mansion, the yachts, the company, all of it belonged to Victoria, my stepmother, and her two golden children. And me? My inheritance was an envelope with a one-way plane ticket to France. They laughed when I opened it. "Guess Dad finally got rid of you," Victoria sneered, her perfectly styled blonde hair gleaming under the crystal chandelier. Damien smirked beside her, arms crossed like he'd been waiting for this moment all his life. Chloe giggled behind him, a high-pitched sound that still echoes in my nightmares. But they didn't know. They couldn't know. That plane ticket, it wasn't a punishment. It was a key to a truth buried for nearly 30 years. A secret even my father couldn't take with him to the grave. My name is Ryan Chandler. I'm 31 years old, living in New York, working as a social activist. I fight for people who can't fight for themselves. Yet here I was, powerless in my own family. The irony wasn't lost on me. I grew up in the Chandler mansion, marble floors that reflected every cold glance, endless hallways that echoed laughter I wasn't part of. My father, Theodore Chandler, was a titan in the real estate world. Tall, commanding, a voice that could make grown men flinch. But to me, he was just distant. I remember sitting at the grand dining table as a child, sunlight streaming through silk curtains, illuminating golden silverware and crystal glasses. But the warmth never reached me. "Eat your breakfast, Ryan," he'd say, barely looking up from his financial newspaper. And that was the closest I ever got to affection. When I was 5, everything changed. Victoria stormed into our lives like a hurricane. Blonde, sharp, always perfectly poised. She didn't see me as her husband's son, just a relic from the past she wanted erased. Damien and Chloe followed her lead. Damien, 6 years younger, had the same piercing eyes as my father, cold, calculating. Chloe, 8 years younger, was pampered, sweet-voiced, but cruel beneath her honeyed words. "Ryan, why are you always so quiet?" Chloe would ask, her giggle sharp and teasing. "Doesn't anyone want to play with you?" I lived under their mockery, in the mansion that was both my home and my cage. Rare glimpses of my father never lasted. "Don't bother me, Ryan," he'd say curtly, and I would retreat to my room, staring out at the pristine garden, wondering why I was there. And then there was my mother, a name I barely remembered, a face that existed only in whispers. Every question about her was met with silence or anger. "Don't ask unnecessary questions," my father snapped the few times I tried. Her absence was a hole in my life, one I didn't understand, one I would spend years trying to fill. Now, staring at the envelope in my hands, I realized that hole might finally lead to answers, if I dared to follow the path it opened. The plane ticket wasn't just paper. It was a gateway to truth, confrontation, and a life I never knew I had the right to claim. And so, with a trembling hand, I folded it back into the envelope, my heart racing. This was only the beginning. The airport was a blur of motion. People rushing, announcements echoing, suitcases rolling like tiny storms across the floor. I clutched the envelope with the plane ticket like a lifeline, my knuckles white. It felt surreal. Just a few hours ago, I'd been trapped in the cold walls of the Chandler mansion, mocked, belittled, and cast aside. Now I was leaving everything behind, my father, my stepmother, my half-siblings, and stepping into the unknown. The flight attendant called my row and I moved forward, heart hammering. The plane's engines roared to life, and as we ascended into the clouds, I stared out the window. New York shrank beneath me, a city of wealth, power, and yet, for me, only loneliness. I thought about the ticket again. What exactly was waiting for me in France? Why would my father leave this strange key instead of fortune or letters? The hours passed slowly. I tried to distract myself with the in-flight magazine, the hum of the engines, the quiet chatter of passengers. But my mind kept circling back to one question: who would meet me at the other end? Then, halfway through the flight, she appeared. A woman elegant, with hair the color of midnight and eyes that seemed to see straight through me. She sat across the aisle, her gaze fixed on me. There was something familiar, not in face, but in presence. The kind of presence that makes you feel like you've been standing in the wrong room your entire life. "Ryan Chandler?" she asked, her voice smooth but firm. I blinked, startled. "Yes, that's me," I said cautiously, unsure if I should be afraid or relieved. "I've been waiting for you," she said, sliding a thick folder across the empty seat between us. "You're not going to believe what I've found." I opened the folder. Inside were documents, photos, and legal papers, proof that my inheritance wasn't what it seemed. My father had hidden a secret, a part of the family that Victoria never wanted me to find. Who are you? I whispered, overwhelmed. My name is Isabelle Dubois, she said, her accent smooth, almost musical. I knew your father. He trusted me to give this to you if the day ever came when you needed the truth. My hands trembled as I scanned the papers. There were letters from my father, accounts in Europe, and references to someone I had never met, someone who could change everything. This is real? I asked, my voice barely audible. Every bit of it, Isabelle replied. And Ryan? You have no idea what's waiting for you in France. The plane hit turbulence and I gripped the armrest. But my mind wasn't on the turbulence. It was on the life I had never been allowed to live. The family secrets that had been buried for decades, and the confrontation I was about to face. Why me? Why now? I asked, still clutching the folder. Because your father believed you were ready, she said, a faint smile touching her lips. And because some truths once hidden are far too dangerous to ignore. The hours passed like minutes, and soon the plane began its descent into Paris. The city spread below, lights twinkling like a map of possibilities, secrets, and destiny. I realized that in just a few steps, I would leave behind the mockery, the cold mansion, and the family that never wanted me, and I would step into a story that was bigger than any inheritance. A story of betrayal, mystery, and perhaps revenge. As the plane touched down, my heart pounded. I clutched the folder tighter. This was the beginning of everything I had been waiting for. And I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. The taxi drove through narrow cobblestone streets, the smell of fresh bread and coffee wafting from small cafes. Paris was alive with its usual chaos, but my mind was elsewhere, on the folder Isabelle had given me, on the plane ticket that had brought me here, and on the life my stepmother had tried to erase. Finally, we arrived at the mansion. It was nothing like the sprawling, cold estate I'd grown up in. This was grand, yes, but warm. Centuries-old stone walls draped in ivy, tall windows reflecting the golden glow of the afternoon sun. There was a serenity here that my childhood home had never known. Isabelle led me up the steps, past carved wooden doors and intricate mosaics, into a sitting room lined with books and photographs. She gestured for me to sit. Everything you need to know is here, she said, placing a small key on the table. But Ryan, be careful. What's hidden behind that door changes. Everything you thought you knew about your family. My hands shook as I took the key. A door at the far end of the room caught my attention. Heavy oak, locked yet oddly inviting. That's it, Isabelle whispered. The room your father always kept locked. He never wanted Victoria to find it. And now, you need to see what he left for you. I hesitated. For a lifetime, doors had meant rejection, exclusion, and cold walls between me and love. But this door, this felt different. It felt like hope. Turning the key, the lock clicked and the door creaked open. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old books, polished wood, and something else. Something that made my heart skip a beat. On the desk, a collection of letters, legal documents, and photographs were neatly stacked. But what caught my eye immediately was a framed photograph. My father, smiling genuinely, holding a baby I didn't recognize. I froze. Who is this? I whispered, more to myself than to Isabelle. Your mother's side, she said softly. This is the family Victoria never wanted you to know about. And this, she tapped a stack of documents, proves that the inheritance she took from you was never truly hers to claim. The letters told stories I had never imagined, of my father's secret partnership with a French family, of promises made and kept, of a woman he had loved and lost long before Victoria. And there, in black and white, was the proof. My father had left me a rightful claim in France, hidden from Victoria's greed. I felt a surge of emotions, anger, relief, disbelief. I can't believe this, I murmured. All those years. She lied. They lied. Isabelle placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. They did. But now it's your turn, Ryan. You can reclaim what's yours. And perhaps finally confront them. I looked around the room again. Every photograph, every letter, every legal document, it was like a map leading me out of the shadows of my childhood and into a life I was always meant to have. But how? I asked. How do I even begin? Step by step, she said, her eyes steady. Start with the people who tried to erase you. The rest will follow. For the first time in my life, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't known in decades. Power, purpose, and hope. As I stared at the photograph of the unknown family, a plan began to form. Victoria, Damien, Chloe. They thought they had won, but they didn't know I had everything I needed right here. And the best part, they would never see it coming. For the first time in years, I felt awake, alive. The mansion in France wasn't just a place. It was a map of my father's secret life, a key to the inheritance that Victoria and her children had stolen. And now, I had a choice. Sit in the shadows like I had all my life, or step into the light and claim what was rightfully mine. Isabel poured coffee into delicate porcelain cups as I spread the documents across the oak table. Contracts, property deeds, bank accounts, all of it real, all of it mine. "This is unbelievable," I whispered, staring at the papers as though they could somehow whisper back their secrets. "It is," Isabel said calmly. "And it's why Victoria feared you. She knew that if you ever found this, nothing she built could withstand it." I took a deep breath. My mind raced with possibilities. How would I confront Victoria? How would I reclaim what she stole without giving her a chance to destroy me again? "First," Isabel said, "we need proof. Evidence that she tried to take everything and hide your father's wishes." I nodded, adrenaline surging through me. My father's handwriting on letters, old emails, hidden contracts. Every piece of paper was a dagger in Victoria's carefully constructed world. "Then we hit them where it hurts," Isabel continued, her eyes gleaming. "Legally, socially, publicly. They've built a life on greed, Ryan. Now it's time for the truth to surface." The plan started to take shape. Step 1. Gather irrefutable evidence of Victoria's manipulation and my father's secret will. Step 2. Confront the family directly, under their noses in New York. Step 3. Let the world see that I was never just a stepchild. I was the rightful heir all along. As I absorbed the weight of it, a wave of memories washed over me. The endless dinners in silence, the mocking laughter of Damien and Chloe, the cold glance of my father. I'd been powerless then, not anymore. "And what about the rich woman you mentioned earlier?" I asked, looking at Isabel. "Patience," she replied. "She's part of the reason you came here. She'll ensure your father's legacy can't be stolen again." Days turned into nights as I studied every document, memorized names, dates, and transactions. Isabel guided me, showing me loopholes and opportunities. My stepmother had thought she could erase me, but she hadn't counted on my persistence, or on the allies my father had quietly left behind. One evening, I found a letter hidden behind an old painting. It was from my father, addressed to me, never sent. "Ryan," it read, "if Victoria ever tries to take everything from you, remember this: wealth is meaningless without honor. You are my son. The truth is your inheritance. Protect it. Fight for it. One day you'll understand why I left the ticket." My hands shook. My father had left me a path to justice, even in his death. The plane ticket wasn't exile, it was freedom. "We'll do it," I whispered to Isabel. "We'll take it all back." "Good," she said, smiling. "But Ryan, this will change you. Once they see what you're capable of, nothing will ever be the same." I leaned back in the chair, feeling the power of purpose for the first time in my life. I wasn't just a victim anymore. I was ready to reclaim everything: my father's legacy, my identity, and my life. The plan was set, and Victoria Chandler would soon learn that the boy she tried to erase had grown into a man who could never be ignored. The flight back to New York felt heavier than the one that had brought me to France. This time, it wasn't anticipation that filled the air. It was determination. Every document in my folder, every letter, every hidden account, was a weapon I could use. And the plane ticket that had once seemed like a cruel joke was now my symbol of power, of destiny, and of a life Victoria could never take from me again. Stepping off the plane, the familiar skyline of New York didn't feel familiar at all. The streets, the yellow taxis, the towering buildings, they all carried memories of a childhood spent under the cold gaze of my father and the mocking smiles of my stepmother and siblings. But this time, I wasn't the powerless boy who had run to his room in silence. This time, I was Ryan Chandler, the rightful heir, armed with truth and a plan. I arrived at the Chandler mansion late in the evening. The grand building loomed over me like a memory of every insult, every ignored cry for recognition, every moment I had been told I didn't belong. But tonight, I didn't feel fear. I felt purpose. Victoria opened the door herself, her perfect blonde hair cascading over her shoulders, her smile sharp and calculated. "Ryan," she said, as if seeing me was the most inconvenient thing in her life. "Back so soon?" I held her gaze. "I'm here for what's mine," I said calmly, letting the words settle between us like a storm cloud. Behind her, Damien and Chloe appeared. Damien's smirk faltered when he noticed the determination in my eyes. Chloe's giggle was nowhere to be heard. For the first time, the roles had reversed. "And what exactly do you think is yours?" Victoria asked, her voice icy. I placed the folder on the grand dining table, the documents spilling out like proof of a life she had tried to erase. "Everything my father intended for me," I said. "All the accounts, the properties, the trusts, everything Victoria tried to hide. You thought you could erase me, but the truth always finds a way." Victoria's face paled for a fraction of a second, enough to know she recognized the danger now. "That's impossible," Damien said, his voice cracking slightly. "He left everything to you?" That's not legal!" I opened one of the letters, letting my father's words speak louder than I ever could. "Ryan, if Victoria ever tries to take everything from you, remember this. Wealth is meaningless without honor. You are my son. The truth is your inheritance. Protect it. Fight for it." I watched as the color drained from their faces. They had underestimated me, just as they had always done. Then I turned to Chloe, who had been watching silently. "You don't have to fear me," I said gently. "But you need to understand, the life you built on lies is gone, and there's nothing you can do to stop the truth." Victoria's shoulders slumped, the carefully maintained mask of control crumbling. You weren't supposed to find this," she whispered, barely audible. "You underestimated my father." "And me," I said, my voice steady. "That was your first mistake." I spent the evening going through each document with Isabel's guidance. Contracts, bank accounts, property deeds, all of it authenticated and ready to reclaim legally. Every stone they had tried to hide behind was now exposed. By the end of the night, Victoria had retreated into silence. Damien had stopped arguing, and Chloe sat in stunned disbelief. The Chandler mansion, once a place of fear and exclusion for me, now felt like the stage for my long overdue vindication. Later, alone in my father's old study, I reflected on everything. The plane ticket, the journey to France, Isabel's guidance, the secret inheritance. It wasn't just about money. It was about truth, justice, and reclaiming the life I had been denied. And as I looked out at the city, I realized something else. The confrontation wasn't just external. Victoria and my half-siblings might have lost control on the stage, but the real victory was within me. For the first time, I felt whole. But even as I celebrated, a thought lingered. There were still secrets my father had kept. Truths even Victoria didn't know. And I had the plane ticket, the documents, and the courage to uncover them all. The battle was won, but the war for the full truth was just beginning. The night after confronting Victoria, sleep refused to come. I wandered the halls of the Chandler mansion. The echoes of my childhood, the laughter that wasn't for me, the cold silences, the mocking smiles of Damien and Chloe, pressing down like a weight. For decades I had been powerless, overlooked, dismissed, and yet now, armed with the documents from France, I felt an unfamiliar pulse of strength and purpose. Isabel and I returned to the French mansion, the place where my father had hidden his life's most guarded secrets. Each time we unlocked a drawer or opened a cabinet, it was as if my father himself were guiding me, whispering, "This is yours, Ryan, claim it." The mansion smelled of polished wood and old leather, a sharp contrast to the cold marble of the Chandler estate in New York. Here, warmth existed in the details, the cracks in the walls that held years of history, the sunlit garden visible from every window, the soft rustle of papers in the study. It felt like a sanctuary, a place where I could finally be the son my father had intended me to be. Isabel handed me a stack of folders. Legal documents, photographs, and letters were carefully organized. She watched me as I sifted through them, her expression calm but intense. "Every one of these pieces is a part of your father's plan," she said. Victoria never saw this coming. She thought she had erased you completely. But she didn't account for foresight, patience, and truth. I paused on a folder marked Chandler Trusts, Confidential. My heart raced as I opened it. Inside were detailed plans for properties, bank accounts and investments spread across Europe, all in my name. Victoria had access to none of it. Damien and Chloe had no idea this fortune existed. She thought she could take everything, I whispered. But she never understood that my father always had a backup plan, for me. Then Isabel handed me a smaller envelope, sealed with my father's personal insignia. My hands shook as I broke the seal. Inside were letters from a woman I did not know. My biological mother. The mother Victoria had tried to erase from my life. Reading the letters, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades, a connection to a woman I never knew. A history that had been denied to me. She spoke of hopes for my future, of assets and influence she had left untouched in France, designed to merge with my father's holdings. She planned for me? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Exactly, Isabel said. Victoria never knew. And even if she had suspected, she couldn't stop it. Your father trusted you to find this when the time was right. The letters painted a picture of my father as more than just a distant, cold figure. He had been planning for my independence, for my victory over the very people who had sought to suppress me. My father's love was quiet, invisible to Victoria, but it had always been there, embedded in every hidden trust, every secret account, every carefully preserved letter. We spent hours uncovering more. Contracts falsified by Victoria, hidden bank transfers, and evidence of her manipulation. Every page I turned made me more certain. She had underestimated me. She had underestimated how deeply my father had prepared me for this moment. Ryan, Isabel said, her voice low and serious, the most important part isn't just reclaiming the wealth. It's reclaiming your identity, your legacy, your rightful place. Everything Victoria tried to erase. You're about to restore it. I felt a wave of emotion, anger at the years lost, relief that the truth existed, and determination that I would see this through. I couldn't let Victoria's greed define my life any longer. Then came the final letter, my father's handwriting. Direct, firm, but filled with love. Ryan, if you are reading this, you have taken the first step into the life I always intended for you. You have the power to reclaim what is yours and to correct the wrongs done by those who sought to erase you. Trust yourself. Trust the truth. And remember, courage and patience are your greatest allies. I read it over and over. The words weren't just instructions. They were a call to action. Victoria and her children had robbed me of childhood, of attention, of belonging, but they could never take this from me. My father's faith in me, and the truth that would set me free. I realized then that the plane ticket, the documents, and the hidden inheritance were not just about wealth. They were about justice, closure, and the power to confront the people who had wronged me. It's time, I said quietly, looking out at the French countryside. Time to end this. Time to reclaim everything. Isabel nodded. Victoria won't see it coming. You have every piece you need. The only question now is, are you ready to face her? I clenched the folder tightly. Every betrayal, every insult, every moment of being overlooked, mocked or dismissed, it all fueled me. I'm ready, I said, my voice steady, full of conviction. More than ever. The mansion had given me the tools. France had given me the evidence. And now New York would witness the rise of a man. Victoria Chandler thought she had destroyed. The war was far from over, but with every secret uncovered, with every truth revealed, I realized one thing. This time I would win. Completely. The flight from France back to New York was quiet. Isabel sat beside me, her presence steady, her eyes sharp with anticipation. Outside the window, clouds raced past, but inside, my mind was racing faster. Every plan, every document, every secret my father had left for me had led to this moment. Tonight I would face Victoria Chandler, reclaim my inheritance, and finally confront the family that had tried to erase me. As the plane touched down, I felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. This wasn't just about money. It was about justice, truth, and my identity. Victoria had spent years laughing at my supposed weakness, mocking my quiet demeanor and dismissing me as a nobody. But I was nobody no longer. I was Ryan Chandler. And I had the proof, the power, and the plan to take back everything. The taxi ride to the mansion was a journey through memories. The yellow cabs, the familiar streets, the towering buildings. Each reminded me of the boy who had once stood alone in the cold hallways of this house, wishing for recognition. That boy was gone. This time I walked in ready to claim what was mine. I arrived at the mansion just as dusk fell. The warm glow of chandeliers lit the halls, but I could see the shadows of anxiety already flickering in Victoria's eyes. She opened the door herself, perfectly poised, but her smile didn't reach her eyes this time. Ryan, she said carefully, as if measuring each word. Back so soon? I stepped forward, holding the folder tightly. I'm here to settle things once and for all, I said, letting the calm in my voice carry weight. Damien and Chloe appeared behind her. Damien's usual smirk faltered, and Chloe's sweet-faced laughter was gone. Something in my posture, in the determination in my eyes, had stripped away their confidence. "And exactly what do you think you're entitled to?" Victoria asked, her voice sharp but brittle. "Everything my father intended for me," I said, placing the folder on the grand dining table. "Every account, every property, every trust, everything you thought you could steal or hide. The truth is mine now." I opened one of the letters for effect, letting my father's words echo through the room. "Ryan, if Victoria ever tries to take everything from you, remember this. Wealth is meaningless without honor. You are my son. Protect the truth, and it will protect you." Victoria's hands trembled slightly as she realized the power I now held. Damien and Chloe glanced at each other, panic creeping in. For the first time, I wasn't afraid. They were. "You think money defines me?" I continued. "It never did. What defines me is the truth, the life my father prepared me to claim, and the courage to stand up to the lies you built your empire on." Victoria tried to speak, to assert control, but I held up a hand. "Save it. Every falsified contract, every forged signature, every hidden account, it's all here. You underestimated me. You underestimated my father. And most importantly, you underestimated the son you tried to erase." I spent the next hour walking them through every document. Contracts, secret accounts, letters from my mother, the charitable trust my father had left, all undeniable, all authentic. With each revelation, Victoria's confidence crumbled further. Damien's arrogance dissolved, and Chloe's smugness disappeared. This can't be legal," Damien stammered, flipping through papers frantically. "It is," I said calmly, "and soon the world will know. The assets, the inheritance, the legacy, it all belongs to me. Legally, morally, and by the design of the only person who mattered, my father." Victoria sank into the chair at the head of the table. Her carefully maintained mask of superiority shattered. I didn't think you'd find it," she whispered, almost to herself. "You never understood him," I replied, my voice steady. "Or me. But now it's too late. The truth is here, and nothing you do can erase it." I took a moment to look around the room. This mansion, once a symbol of exclusion and cruelty, had become the stage for my vindication. Every hallway, every chandelier, every marble floor now echoed the sound of justice being served. Then I opened a final envelope, one my father had left specifically for this moment. It contained the instructions to claim the remaining assets, the philanthropic projects, and a hidden legal document that would secure my name as the sole heir in every remaining legal and financial matter. "So, this is it," I said softly, realizing the magnitude of what I held. "Every secret, every hidden truth, every stolen inheritance. It's mine." Isabel smiled beside me, a calm certainty in her eyes. "And now, Ryan, you can step fully into the life your father intended for you. Victoria can't touch you anymore." I took a deep breath. For the first time in decades, I felt whole. The boy who had been ignored, mocked, and erased no longer existed. In his place stood a man in control of his destiny, reclaiming every piece of a life that had been stolen from him. Victoria and her children would have to live with the truth, but I no longer needed their approval. I had everything I ever deserved: justice, inheritance, identity, and the courage to live life on my own terms. As I looked out over New York from the balcony of the Chandler Mansion, the city lights stretched before me like a map of possibilities. I felt a surge of hope, pride, and triumph. The journey had been long, painful, and filled with obstacles, but it had brought me to this moment, victorious, unshakable, and finally free. For Ryan Chandler, the story was no longer about being overlooked or erased. It was about claiming the life that had always been his, exposing the truth and proving that no one, not Victoria, not Damien, not Chloe, not even fate itself, could ever take that away again. The war had ended. The inheritance had been reclaimed. And Ryan Chandler had finally stepped into the life he was always meant to live.